on Nova Legends podcast, I have Josh Burton, a kid, one of the toughest kids I've ever coached. I coached him at Summer League at Robinson back in the mid to late 90s. Uh, Josh played soccer and basketball at Robinson, and then he went to James Madison, where he was environmental geology and environmental scientist, BS. Worked in that field for many years. Now is in sales. But more specifically, I want to talk to Josh about officiating. Josh is the NCAA ref, and maybe he does other levels as well, which we'll get into. Josh, thanks for doing this. Great to see you.
Thanks, Julian. It's awesome to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well look, man. Yeah, good to see you too. My son has gotten into officiating recently. He was, and like you, he was a soccer player, and he didn't play much
Yeah.
basketball at all, and didn't even watch much. And so he's. I try to get him into intramural officiating, and he did, and he's doing soccer as well. But he really likes basketball because it's just more challenging, and there's more opportunities. But so whenever we watch a game, he'll always look at me and say, "Dad, isn't that a travel?" And I swear I don't even know anymore. So when I called back in 2005 was my last year, I knew what a travel is. Now I have no idea what a travel is. It seems like there's Euro steps, there's other steps. It's they carry the ball. How should I advise Chandler about travels?
Well, I guess I can pass some of the advice that we've received recently, and that's to get the ones that are really obvious. The ones that everybody in the place knows is a travel. Um, Nowadays players are so fast, and it's so difficult to tell when they end their dribble. They started doing that jump move where they end their dribble in the air. And if they end their dribble in the air, then they can go ahead and make a couple of steps afterwards. Versus if they end the dribble with one foot on the floor and then jump, there's a whole different set of parameters. So what we've been instructed to do for the most part is not split hairs on travels and just get the ones that are very obvious.
Is it a call that you struggle with? Is it the most challenging call? I remember when I called, backcourt was always tough because I always felt like the crowd had a better view of that than we did sometimes because they could sit there and look at it, and where we kind of, especially with two man, we're kind of guessing. But it is traveling the
Sure.
toughest call you have to make.
I don't know if it's the toughest call, but it's up there, because there's so much going on, and we're looking at the defense and making sure that they're legal. We try to pick up the pivot foot as soon as the player catches the ball and then get our eyes to the defender. And, sometimes we miss that split step or that rocker step as somebody goes for a blow by or something along those lines. And then in the post, it's really hard. These guys are so fast and athletic and physical now. It's really tough.
Yeah. Well, let's go back before we get back into fishing and talk about your playing career. I know I never saw you play soccer, but Coach Boyer told me that you were a really good player. How did you get in? How did you get into sports?
So I mean, I got into sports probably like almost everybody else as a young kid. Just getting out there, playing in the yard, playing around town. Started playing soccer and basketball, and just kind of stuck with it at all levels. Soccer, the travel stuff started probably in middle school, I would say, beginning of high school. I started getting a little bit more serious about soccer, and was playing on some little bit of a higher level teams. And then, I played soccer and hoop right up until I tore my ACL going into my senior year.
Which sport did you prefer?
It depended on the season. During soccer season, if you ask me, I preferred soccer, and during basketball season, I would say I prefer basketball.
And you were a center mid in soccer. That's how I could foresee you.
No, I actually played in the back. I
Oh,
was either a left back or a right back,
yeah, I can see
depended
it.
on,
Very
yeah,
similar.
yeah. High school, I played on the right, and club, I played on the left.
Do you still follow soccer?
A little bit, yeah, yeah. My son is getting into soccer now. He's 9. He just played his first year this past year. I helped coaching a little bit, so with him getting into it, we've been following it a little more closely now.
Are you surprised how much the game has changed, soccer, since you played?
It really has, yeah. Yeah, but I'm sure if we go back and look at basketball from, when I was playing or when you were playing compared to now, I mean, everything is 3 and D, and nobody's putting the ball in the post anymore like we used to do.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. I mean, I didn't follow soccer. I played. Everyone played the house league and stuff when they're really young, but I
Yeah.
didn't follow it until my son got into it back in 2009. I guess he started in 2008, and then I started watching every single game I can on TV, and I really understood it. And it seemed so much different. But you're right. I guess basketball, when people watch the '85 Celtics Lakers, it doesn't even resemble the NBA game of today.
No, it really doesn't with the physicality, and nowadays you it's really hard. You put a hand on somebody and we're calling fouls on guys now.
Yeah.
Um, things have really opened up. The freedom of movement, and they want plays at the rim and all that kind of stuff. So it's a different game now than it was a long time ago.
One thing I felt is different, and maybe it's because it's two man instead of three. We knew the referees' names better back in the old days than we know now. Like Jake Strom and was it Earl Strom, Jake Lavetta, uh, Jess Kersey. The referees were big figures, and they weren't big guys. They were little. They seemed like the little guys back then. Nowadays, I know there's an emphasis on the physical appearance, but we won't necessarily even know the names of the refs today. Even in an NBA game, well, we may know I guess they call him the R or the head guy who's in charge, but generally the referees are more nameless now than they used to be.
I think that's contribute. There's a few things I think that contribute to that a little bit. I think one is that we've removed a lot of the personality from officiating. The obvious calls. You're not seeing referees coming out of their shoes on block charge plays anymore as much. And the staffs are a little bit bigger as well. I think the NBA staff, I don't know what the NBA staff is now, but years ago, I think it was in the 40s. And so you had the same people on the games consistently. And then they had a little bit more personality too. So I think they've moved away from that a little bit, I think.
When you say coming out of your shoes, you mean like oversell it? Like yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
interesting
exactly
because
right. Yep.
when referees used to call 3 point plays, and there were some refs that really like to exaggerate that. I always felt like, look, we shouldn't be happy we're calling a 3 point play. We should almost call it as like almost as a matter of fact, like almost like we have to call it because they've already scored. And I've always felt that there was no need, as long as your mechanic was crisp, there was really no need to oversell it.
Yep. And I think you're exactly right. Usually nowadays when somebody's overselling something, they probably got it wrong.
Yeah, yeah, definitely right. So who are some of your biggest influence in terms of mentors and coaches, either in soccer and basketball growing up?
Growing up, well, you were one
No,
for
that's
sure.
nice of you to say.
With hoop, and the fact that we're still in touch, and I see your name around, and I realized now that I didn't know before was how influential you were, not just on people in our team, but outside of the Robinson area, and the how much you follow, and your knowledge of Northern Virginia hoops is pretty impressive.
Well, thank you,
Um,
but I wasn't asking that question to get that response.
Well, that is the truthful response, and who Coach Boyer also is a high school coach, and before that Jim Bunnell was my coach for travel hoop as a young kid, and I think he had a big influence on me really enjoying the game when I was first learning it and getting a strong set of fundamentals.
Yeah. Do you still remember those Northern District basketball games when you played? I'm trying to think who was in your generation, but the games were very physical in the mid to late '90s, and the teams were. You got Robinson was very tough, but TC was tough. Um, who else was? I think Haifa was in our district, but do you still remember those bruising Northern District matchups?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we always had wars. We could never beat TC. We'd go into the Garden and just get absolutely smoked. Same thing with Hayfield, West Potomac, Lake Braddock. I mean, there were constant every night. It seemed like we were just going out there and getting beat up.
Yeah. When did you start noticing officials? I mean, in terms of maybe I may want to do that one day.
So, like your son, when I was in college and I started playing intramurals a little bit and realized that rather than playing, I could wear the stripes and make a little bit of money. And as a lot of college kids, we need money. And so it was a nice little side gig. And then I was started doing just the intramural stuff, and then I started picking up some men's leagues, and making a little bit more money and realizing that there was more to it. Um, and then when I graduated from college, I got certified in high school, and things just kind of built from there.
So you've been refereeing ever since college?
Off and on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was see, I was officiating at UVA, and then I was there in graduate school as well. So I got 3 more years, and then I started doing high school at the same time. So by the time I, I worked from '91 to 2005. So by the time I retired, I basically gave it up when I was 40. I'd been doing it for 18 years, and I think people were surprised at that. I think nowadays a lot of kids are starting, but I was kind of different about that. I was one of the few that were doing it at a very young age when I was doing it.
Yeah, so I didn't get certified to start doing high school. I think it was 2006, I think was the first year that I was certified for high school. And then I moved up into college around 2010. I
Mhm.
don't remember exactly which year it was, but it was around 2009, 10 or 2010, 2011 season. Um, so it's been a grind for a long time.
Why did you move up to Massachusetts?
So I got a job out of college, working at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution,
Mhm.
and I moved straight up there, and and I was there for about 20 years, and then just recently changed careers and moved into sales.
Have you liked it up there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been great. We relocated off of the Cape this past summer, and we're living a little bit closer to Boston now, so it's been really nice.
It must have been amazing living on Cape Cod.
It was summertime was great. Wintertime was a little quiet, and when you factor in the travel that I was doing with basketball, it just got to be a little bit too much. There's no colleges near Cape Cod.
Right. So you're not doing high school anymore?
No, no, I gave up high school when my son was born, and he's 9 now. Yeah, he's 9. Yep.
Because like me, you find when you do high school, you end up working it every night. They'll start calling you. If you don't go, then you won't get the big game. So it tends to snowball. Next thing you know, your kids are 10.
Yeah. Well, I mean, truthfully, that's probably one of the hardest things is that, every weekend I'm on the road somewhere. And a lot of nights during the week too. So I've been missing a lot of, birthday parties and, all the family events that, non-referees or people that aren't working on the weekends are able to go to.
Yeah. So when you're not doing Division 1, um, it seems like to me you'd miss high school because when you go to Division 3 games, unless the team has some kind of like what's that school in Pennsylvania that's so good in basketball, soccer. But if you don't have a lot, if they don't have football, maybe they have a basketball culture and they get some crowds. But generally, Division 3, you have empty gyms, and so you end up traveling. Like if you're in DC, you go to Mary Washington, you might go to Shenandoah or whatever. It might be 500 people in the gym. Whereas a high school on a Tuesday and Friday night, you got a packed gym. The games mean something. It's the players know each other. Crowds yelling at you. Did you miss that environment when you stopped doing high school and you're doing Division 3 ball?
Well, there's a big change here also from Northern Virginia to Cape Cod. Cape Cod high school basketball is very different. I mean the gyms are, they've got 3 rows of bleachers for the most part. They're all very small schools, and so we weren't. As a high school basketball referee, I wasn't seeing that on Cape Cod, that environment. They'd be lucky if there were 30 people in the gym
Oh,
at a
is that
lot of those
right?
games.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very eye opening when I got up to Cape Cod and I got certified to work high school basketball, and I was all gung ho and I walked into my first gym, which was a varsity game, believe it or not, my first high school game, and the gym was tiny. I think there were 3 rows of bleachers on either side, and there might have been 35 people in the gym.
So it was nothing like the way you grew up, your memories of
Absolutely not. Not even close. And most of a lot of the college venues I go to now are not as nice as many of the gyms in Northern Virginia, high school gyms.
yeah, when I saw you referee at Harvard on TV that night, I mean, it's an historic gym, but it looks a lot like what you'd see. It looks like the old Patriot, George Mason Patriot gym, which or a very nice high school gym.
That's exactly right. That's what a lot of even in these Division One schools, some of they don't hold what Robinson High School held. I mean, some of these gyms are only holding 1,000, 2,000 fans, which is good because if they get banged out, then it's a really tough and good environment. But that doesn't always happen.
Yeah. So when I was coming up, there was a guy, a local guy named Charles. He was on the NBA list for a while. I can't think of his name. He probably Charles Lambert maybe, but he was trying to get me to go to camps and get on the list, and he was very ambitious with it. And I remember I just want to do high school games and live life. I don't need to. I never wanted to be that ambitious with it.
Yeah.
Is there a conflict you see with when you get to a certain point where if you want to get really serious about it, you have to kind of go all in. But if you go all in, it might hurt your work, families, other things. Do you see refs making these decisions about trade-offs? When they're deciding how far they want to go, how far they can go.
Very much. I would say, when I first started going to camps, and I mean, it's a grind. I mean, refereeing it's not what most people think. Most people see, you show up at a game and you work the game and you leave, but it's a grind. I'm scouting every night, watching film on both teams before, the days before I get there, and I know everybody's name. You get to the gym at least 2 hours before. Afterwards, you've got reports and plays to send into your supervisor and your phone calls and all kinds of stuff. And then you move on to the next day, and you still got to break the game down, break the film down from the night before, and then start scouting and working on your next game. So you couple that with the fact that it's all year round, and you talk about camps. These are like training grounds for us in the summertime and in the off season. And so coming up, there were tryout camps and teaching camps, and I was probably going to 4 to 5 of them each summer. And that's paying for hotels and travel and airfare for some of them, plus fees for the camp. And then you're so a lot of the people that I started with, very few of us have made it to Division One, and part of it is talent, and the other part of it is, like you said, you've got life and family and jobs and other things, and at some point you have to say, am I going to keep grinding and going through all of this night in and night out and all summer long, all year long? Is it worth it for the time away from family and work?
Hmm. You mentioned watching film before you referee teams. So you want to know a lot about the players before you referee the game?
I want to know everything I can find out before the game. So I will break down at least 1 or 2 games of each team before I have them, so that I know what defenses they're running, their inbound plays, their offenses. I want to know if they're going to set a high screen and roll and pop and pick or whatever they're going to do, so that I can be in position when I see that play coming to know where the ball is going to go. Um,
Now, do all refs do that? I always thought you kind of, and it kind of shows my ignorance here. I always thought you kind of went out there with an open mind, and you wanted to just and let the game develop. But you're saying that the referees now, part of the technique, part of the preparation, is to know as much as you can about how the method in which they're going to play.
That's right. Just like an opposing coach wants to know all the plays that they're going to run. And so if I can also know the plays and I know the defenses as well, then it just helps me get in position on each possession, to know what's coming. And you know who their dominant players are, and where they like to score from, and how they like to get to the rim. And if some guys create a lot of contact when they go up, other guys just go straight up, and so that helps us referee the best players and all of the players in the game.
Well, one thing I would think that would be interesting in knowing is the um, um, how the coaches can be relied upon to behave. So if coaches have some coaches have reputations for being difficult, and some are known not to talk to say much at all. What is the proper technique in terms of behavior? If you know one coach um, has a reputation of acting up on the sidelines and the other one doesn't, are you going to treat them any differently? Or are you going to treat them the same no matter what their reputation is?
I mean, I don't think the reputation comes into it a whole lot
Mhm.
unless there's a situation where you might have a coach who is really not going to say much, right? And then if they do say something, they're probably right, and chances are we missed something, and then you have coaches that are constantly going to say something on the sideline and they're just trying to get an advantage. So in that sense, you might treat them a little bit differently, where if one coach blows up, you go, okay, you know what, you're probably right. And then the other guy's just constant. And so you have to, manage how you handle that kind of constant coming at you. But for the most part, everybody at the level I'm at is very professional. And when you handle things in a professional manner, then generally you can take care of any personality, and you try to limit um, the more well, I guess the more aggressors, if you will. You try to contain them a little bit more, and because otherwise, the game can get ugly pretty quickly.
Yeah. And those things, if you have trouble with the coach, not trouble, but you give him a technical foul. I don't even think that's trouble. That's part of the game. Is
Yeah.
that something that you have to report that to like your supervisor, and that's something that will be considered on assignments going forward, or does that technical foul kind of end with the game?
A little bit of both.
Mhm.
All technical fouls have to get reported
Mhm.
to the supervisor immediately after the game. Whether, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, you can have an administrative technical for an illegal jersey or something, and that still has to go in. The league office reviews almost everything. Um, and as far as it affecting assignments, if it's warranted, it's not going to. But if for some reason um, I don't know. I don't know of any technical fouls that have negatively or positively really impacted, more than just saying, okay, this person can handle the game, manage the game, manage the situation, manage the benches.
Yeah. Well, Josh, you're not much taller than I am. We're probably about the same size, or I might even have you by an inch or two. I see these referees now. Some of them are monsters. They're really tall, and I remember not when I first started refereeing, but maybe in the early '90s, the mid '90s, we started talking about how a referee looks. That wasn't something we talked about as much in the '80s, but that became something we talked about in the '90s a lot. And all of a sudden, they want the refs to have big. I remember I used to referee with some guy who was taking creatine because he wanted to have these big arms. I used to just sit there and just shake my head. And I was always on the fit side, but I always felt like, look, can you go out there? Can you call the game? Are they still focusing on appearance? Do they want the tall refs? Does it matter what your biceps look like anymore?
Um, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we got to get plays right, and we've got to handle scenarios, and we got to handle situations. Um, Now, if you have two equal referees and they both are doing the same things, and one looks like $1 million and one looks like a slob, chances are the one who looks like a slob is probably not going to get many games or hired, right? I mean, it's just kind of, you want people that are going to look good on TV, and you want people that are going to be able to get up and down the court and are going to look the part. It is a big part of it. But at the end of the day, we got to get plays right and we got to handle situations.
Yeah. Well, how about the officials that don't kind of make the grade? And not because they don't have the commitment, and the commitment could be because of personal issues or professional issues. But what are some of the ways that referees fail to make it? Maybe they can handle the pressure. Maybe they get into it with coaches too much when they don't have to. What are some of the things that you see that hold referees back?
Um, I mean, a lot of it unfortunately comes down to numbers, and they're turning over staff every year. They're dropping 10 to 20% in the bottom and bringing in that same number. We get graded on everything we do. right and wrong. Every call is graded on some level. And if we're not hitting the numbers that we need to hit, it's like any other job. If you're not performing, then you run the risk of losing your job. So I mean, specifically what holds people back, I think it's probably um, your work ethic and what you're doing and how much you're putting into it. And sometimes it's just bad luck also.
Yeah. Now, do you feel like when you're calling college ball, is it helpful not to call different other levels, like maybe semi-pro in the area, or maybe it could be high school? Is it better to stick with the level where you want to focus, or does all the different experiences kind of help you become a better rep?
It's a really good question. And I think if you ask 10 different referees, you might get 10 different answers. For where I was and where I have been in my career, I was doing high school and then I got into college, and then I had a little bit of very little bit of pro experience, and it got complicated because I was dealing with three different rule sets, and things are slightly different, but they are different. And in our business, you can't miss a rule. You can have poor judgment, you can have a bad call, but if something happens with a rule, that's a big mistake. So we have to be really good with the rules, and so that's where the confusion kind of came in for me. And when I was getting enough games with at the college level, I had to make a decision due to family and time commitment and where I wanted my career to go. And ultimately, I wanted to be a college basketball referee, so I focused solely on college.
When's the last time you have you done a girls' game or a women's game?
Um, when I first started getting into high school.
That's right. So is that a thing now in Northern Virginia? The top high school refs, everyone has to do some women's basketball, and
Okay.
it's one of those things they want everyone to kind of share. Generally,
Yeah.
obviously, your best refs are going to be doing the boys' games. The refs are probably maybe the fittest that can get up and down the court, maybe a little bit better because the game might be a little more athletic. But everyone shares a little bit of that, and maybe in a state level game, a person who hasn't done much girls basketball may get a girls state level game as a way of rewarding good work. Um, always felt like the girls' game had a different tempo. I didn't think it was easier to ref, even though there might be less people in the stands. So then maybe the game means less if you mess it up. But I always felt like it was no easier to referee than men's basketball. Since it's been a while for you, do you have any opinion whether refereeing girls and boys could be difficult because the timing is different?
I mean, I don't really know for sure. I mean, it's a little bit of a different game, right? The speed is different, and I don't know about in high school. In college, the rules are different. I mean, I think you kind of at some point for us, we had to make a decision and become a master of that path that we took. So I haven't really had anything to do with girls basketball. My daughter just started playing hoop. So I've been watching more of it now. She's in the sixth grade, so it's in the very beginning stages. But yeah, I don't know. As far as refereeing it goes, I mean it's different. But is it any different than doing a college game and a high school game? I don't know that it would be that much different.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, are you surprised how lucrative it's become to be a Division One ref? But now that I've talked to you, I realize you guys put a lot of time in that we don't see. We don't see. It's not like you're just getting paid. I don't know what it is. Let's say $1,000, a couple $1,000. I don't know what it is, but you're actually putting, besides travel costs and the time of the game, but you might be putting several hours in research before the game starts.
Absolutely. I mean, for very few people is it a full-time job. But it is a full-time job, and it's all year. It's year round. We have meetings in the off season. I think this year I had 4 or 5 rules meetings, probably in September and October, and scrimmages, and a lot of things that we don't get paid for in the off season. I mentioned going to camps, but I also work camps as an evaluator for some of the lower level leagues. So, when we're not getting paid for that stuff, we're trying to grow the officiating community and pick out the next people that, hopefully we can elevate, and that we can work with in the future. So yeah, I am blown away sometimes when I see how much money is available to be made, but it's a lot of time and effort, and there's many years where the money wasn't coming in, but a lot of it was going out to get to the level that we're at now.
Yeah, so one way to look at it. Does being an official, like being a coach, help you professionally in other ways? Like being a coach, there's so many interpersonal skills that you use as a coach, management skills. I mean, it's endless. And I know coaches don't get paid much for their time, especially at the high school level. But do you feel being a referee has helped you professionally in other ways?
I think it's helped me professionally and personally. I think it's made me be a better dad. Handling handling kids when they're doing things they're not supposed to, and being patient, and understanding, and definitely professionally too. I mean, if you're in a heated environment of being on a basketball court, then it makes a lot of other things very easy.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it definitely has.
Well, I posted on our Facebook group a picture of you talking to Tommy Amaker, a legendary Woodson player. What has it been like to get to know Tommy and maybe other coaches that are from the area that you may or may not have known, but you do have a connection being from Northern Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, sometimes seeing these guys on the sidelines, that, I've grown up watching on TV, or, seen and been to camps where they were counselors, and all these other things. It's really, I just feel very blessed to be in to have the opportunity I've had, and to be in the position I'm in, where I can be on the court with some of these just really amazing people and figures in the game.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've said to you before is I didn't like officiating a lot because I felt it was very political, and I felt when I refereed, the people that ran the associations, um, even though I thought we were very professional down here, it was very much I thought a good old boys club, and it's everyone giving their friends good evaluations, and I always felt I was looked down upon because I coached, and they wanted me to decide, and I'm like, well, I wasn't willing to give up coaching at the time, and so maybe in some ways I got what I deserved. But but listening to you talk, and also I've listened to some podcasts about officiating. It seems like they've gone a long way to getting some of the politics out of officiating.
I mean, I think there's probably politics in every aspect of life, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's always going to be favors and whatnot. But I think at the most part, at the level that I'm at, we have to perform. And in college basketball, at any level in college basketball, there are enough referees behind me that if I'm not performing, I will lose my job.
Yeah.
So, I think maybe at some of the lower levels, there might be a lot of politics involved, but I don't really see it as politics at this point. I see it as just performance.
It's so interesting that you talk about referees getting removed and getting demoted because all we hear about is the shortage of officials. That's all we hear about. But when there's money on the table, like you guys are fighting for, and and also a chance to achieve at the highest level, I guess the numbers game works in the other direction.
That's exactly right. And there's a massive shortage. I mean, we've had youth games canceled, left and right because there's not enough referees. And if I was coming up now, I think I would think twice about doing the games that I worked, when I was training and learning, to get, just some of the youth league games and the AAU programs, and some of those things. They're tough to work now.
Yeah. Are there any advantages to living in different parts of the country? I mean, is the greater Boston area or southern Massachusetts, is that a good spot for an official, or maybe an official in DC would have more options in terms of colleges to go to? Does that factor into through your arc, what you can achieve?
It, yes, I think it does. Where I am in New England, I have a lot of schools within a 4 or 5 hour drive. Division III ball in New England is a lot bigger than it is in other parts of the
Yeah,
country.
that's right.
We have over 100 schools, in our kind of greater Boston, New England area up into, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And it's pretty high level Division III ball. We have a really solid Division II conference. Again, I've probably got 10 Division II schools that are within a 2 hour ride from where I'm living. So that all helps. I don't have to get on a plane very often. For a Division I game, I can get down to New York City in a few hours, and then I've got plenty of schools in the Boston area and further north as well.
Yeah. Josh, what about the path to the NBA? Is that something that you ever thought about? And um, is it is it a completely different career path? Because I remember Charles, who I can't remember his last name, such a nice guy, but he was telling me they were taking refs 22, 23 years old and putting them in camps. And it was weird because at the time I thought a referee as being something like a lifetime achievement award. And that was something that you would get after, 20 years of high school and college. But obviously, as you've established clearly today, officiating is about performance and talent. It's not about what you've achieved. Anyway, have you ever thought about officiating at the NBA level?
Um, Not really. When I years ago, I was invited to an NBA camp. They had started this new program where they have different levels of camps that they invite folks to. They have a grassroots camp, a mid-level camp, and an elite camp. And then they hired out of that elite camp into the what is now the G League. Um, I believe that that's still the way the path to getting into the NBA is you go through their camp system, you get to the summer leagues and the G League, and then from there they'll advance you to the WNBA and into the NBA. I like I said, I attended one camp in a summer, and they moved on from me pretty quickly. So I didn't have much choice in my career path that way, but that's okay because I'm happy where I am. And you talk about college side being kind of a full-time job. The NBA and the professional stuff really is much more of a full-time job than where I'm at.
Yeah, they didn't want me as a player either. I was really surprised. I'm like 5'10", can't shoot, but I'm such a tough kid. Um, Michael Lewis, Moneyball guy, has a great podcast on officials, coaches, and stuff. And if you haven't listened to him, you may have heard of it. It's called Know the Rules. But the NBA spent a lot of money at some point trying to get the home court advantage out of the game. Not in terms of there's always going to be home court advantage because that's what being home is all about. And but I guess there was a perception, and they didn't get the analysis. Officials tended to be homers, even at the highest level of officials, and that was something. And they worked really hard, and they were able to reduce that. Um, you know, I watch TV. You could still see biases sometimes. Everyone's human. Is that something as a referee, the referees talk about, and something that you're cognizant of when you do a game?
Uh, Not directly. Like I said, I mean, we really try to focus beforehand on scouting and understanding the teams and their tendencies. And I think that's, I'd like to say I have no biases. I don't, I'm not going into a game having any. And hopefully the crowd isn't influencing any decisions that I'm making. But I know that study was done and the data was out there in the NBA. So um, I don't know. It's not something that I really look for or that's discussed in locker rooms or anything.
Yeah. So what's next for a referee like yourself? My guess is the goal is to get picked up by like certain conferences. Is that what the way it works? And can you work more than one conference? What what's the
Yeah.
what's the path?
So the a little bit of the path. I'm part of an alliance of conferences, And the alliance I'm in is headlined by the ACC in the Big East. And then underneath that, you've got the A10 and the MAC, the MAAC, MAC, and the Colonial Conference. And then there's also Northeast Conference, Ivy League, Patriot League, America East, Big South, and the MEAC. And then we have one Division II league as part of that consortium as well. So we are 11 Division I leagues strong plus one Division II league. So what they do is they bring you into the smaller conferences and the mid majors, see how you perform, and then bump you up to kind of the next tier of leagues there, and then ultimately the goal is to get into the Power Five. Um, so that's kind of my path is I'm in the lower range of the Division I levels. The smallers and the mid majors, and I'm trying to get more games at that level and work my way up into the higher tier leagues and into the power conference hopefully one day.
And the postseason is determined the same way. Like, for example, will the higher rated officials do all the postseason for the higher rated leagues, or do the higher rated officials even get like the Atlantic 10? It's a very high, it's a high league in my regard, but maybe or the
Absolutely.
MAAC. Will they get those postseason games as well, or is it this postseason and regular season is the same?
A lot of it. So I mean, I think I'm hired into six of those leagues, and then you've got some of these other, and then the folks that are in the ACC, the Big East, they're going to be in a lot more, obviously.
Mm,
So a lot of it comes down to availability, and if the Big East is playing on the same night as the America East, then those guys are not going to be available to work in the America East, which means more games for somebody else at a lower level. So it really a lot of it just comes down to scheduling and what nights are available for folks.
yeah. Well, Josh, last question, and this has been great. What is the most enjoyable aspect of officiating? Like when I officiated, I loved the Friday nights, the close game, and when a game's going well, it was always a very good feeling when you had the confidence of the crowd, and they weren't focused on you this night, because some nights, no matter what you do, you feel like they're on you. But for you, what is it you enjoy most about officiating?
Well, it's hard to put just one thing on it, but probably the biggest thing is the friendships that I've made. All of my best friends are referees.
Hmm.
So I put that up there with anything because I'm on the road with these guys and we're going into these arenas and I'm out there with two of my best friends most nights. So I think that's number one, and then number two would probably be being perfect. The fight for perfection night in and night out, and always trying to beat the videotape and get every play right that we can get right.
Yeah.
I think those are the kind of the two motivators that I have.
Yeah. Well, tell Brandon Nyman if he wants to be your best friend anymore, he needs to put the barbell down, get away from that YouTube camera, and get out there and start refereeing some basketball, because he's got a lot of technical fouls that he needs to give all the all the tough fouls that he gave in his career.
I've given up trying to get him to referee. I tried for a while, but no such luck.
Okay. Yeah. Well, look, Josh, this has been great. If I guess you probably wouldn't referee down in the DC area, would you? Um,
I've had a few games down there in the past, but not frequently.
Yeah. Well, if you ever come down here, promise you we won't yell at you. And why are those people cheering for the refs up there? But yeah, well, we love to support you. It's so funny that you refereed that game. I watched the whole game and I didn't even see you. And that, again, I guess obviously a referee, you always want to be anonymous if you could. I always felt that way. But obviously now it's even more of a technique is to just call a game and don't come out of your shoes to make the calls. But you did a great game that night. I remember Jason Coleman. I don't know if you remember Jason, but Jason played at Lake Braddock with Hubert Davis. So you were a young guy, but his son plays for American. So he was at that game, and he had commented that you guys did a great job. Referees were good that night, and he didn't even know any idea why he was saying that. So you guys did a really good job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's good to hear.
Yeah, yeah. So look, so next time you're in town, let us know. But if not, I'll keep trying to find you online.
All right, sounds good, Julian. This was great. Thank you.
Yeah, Josh, it was great to see you again. Thanks for doing this.